want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I didn't expect there to be this many here. The newsletter still has not arrived. It's been a very crazy month with the hurricane, and we've had cancellations of programs. Anyway, I won't fill you all in on that, but I'm glad you came. Thank you. This is the delayed start of the season. The hurricane, the program at the Lyric had to be canceled. They had problems. The only thing I could do was go to the office and leave a message and put a sign on the door. The Lyric is canceled and rescheduled for May, and it will be into the preservation month, and it will be on the preservation of the Lyric, but she will include most of the program that was supposed to be done the other night. The newsletter did not show up today. We went through that a little bit. It will arrive, and it's beautiful. It has the 49 picture of Ben Hodap's car in front of the old Rexall, and an article by my mother, Rose Walton, about how we survived the hurricane.
Whose house was that on top of that picture?
Those two houses that are in there, I don't know whose they are. No, did you get it, the newsletter?
You gave it to me today.
Oh, I gave it to you, that's right. He couldn't get the two that I had sent downloaded, so he just put 2 hurricane pictures in there and sent it. I want to give you word on Alice Lockhart, our corresponding secretary, had a heart attack during Hurricane Irma, and then was scheduled for a triple bypass the next day and couldn't have it till the next day. And she got out of there and went to rehab, and when they checked her wound, it was infected. She went back to the hospital and has had it scraped and cleaned many times and is still in there. She's hoping, I heard from her today, she's hoping to be released maybe by Saturday if the last inspection comes back good. She's been through a really terrible time, so I hope you all will give her your thoughts and prayers. The program for tonight was supposed to be Mr. Prairie. I don't think he's here, but he couldn't do it, and so I had this one that I had done years ago, and I just added some to it. If you've seen it before, I don't know that you'll remember that much of it, but it's still interesting. Our program schedules keep changing because people keep canceling. But the one for November, there's a lady sitting in here, and if she cancels, I'm going to be very upset. Sandy Thurlow is going to do a program on the 25th grand opening of the Stuart Heritage Museum, which was in November of '92. I'm looking forward. Sandy is handling that.
May I just give it an extra plug? May I just give it an extra plug?
Sure.
I just hope you all will come because the museum is a miracle. And I have lots of things to share with you. And the founder of Stuart Heritage is back in town. Don Armstrong has moved back to town. So he will be there, and I hope I've contacted many of the people that laid the foundation. And I hope they will come. I hope you'll talk it up. I think it'll be a good program. And I hope you will come. And it's going to be right here, and it's going to be the 14th of November. And because of that newsletter having a problem this time, I had my text to turn in tomorrow. I didn't want to turn it in today when Mary had the program today, but we'll get it off so we'll get our newsletter in time.
That would have probably put me over the line if that had happened.
And then I want to say another thing that I am up to is I have been just really so loving these letters that were written by Lucy Richards in 1880. People do not realize how rare to have something that's firsthand that was written when this was such a wilderness. And this area of South Florida was the most wilderness of all, my goodness. And so I have been working hours and hours on them again. I worked on them some years ago. But I'm giving a program at the Susan Johnson Auditorium. And Susan Johnson was a founding member, an early member of Stuart Heritage, and she gave the money to the college to have this beautiful room, the Susan Johnston room at the Chastain Center, and it's state of the art. And so I have a college girl to help me, will be reading the letters, and I'll do the comment, and I have photographs that I didn't have before. So it's at 1 o'clock on Friday, the 3rd of November, and I would appreciate it if a few of you would come.
Sorry.
Thank you, Sandy. We're looking forward to it. To start the program tonight, I have to read you the Stuart Heritage Museum's hurricane policy, because we really are strict about people working during hurricanes. And so this is office procedure covering storms and office closing. As we watch the progress of a storm, the following are the guidelines based upon the hurricane's intensity. Hurricane Category 1, no excuse for being late. Leave early to give time to avoid fallen trees and limbs. Category 2, Debbie, are you listening? Due to the horizontal rain, you may wear jeans. Category 3, whereas most of the area will be flooded, we suggest that you avoid wearing open-toed sandals when coming to work. Canoes will be provided to get to the building safely without getting wet. Category 4, there will be no electricity, so we will have manual typewriters available to all staff members. Please take extra caution and wear waterproof makeup in Category 4 or above. Category 5, Velcro will be provided to keep you attached to your chairs when the windows roll. For those that survive, we will have coffee cake in the back room at 3 o'clock. Have a nice day. That's what they do for the day. Okay, I think we're ready to start our program. Let's see if we need to go. Okay, Debbie, let's go to 1. This is going to be the 1928. There has been many, many hurricanes, as all of you know, in the state of Florida. But we're only going to cover the ones that have directly impacted us. In 1928, there was a terrible hurricane, not so bad here, but in the western Martin County, it was one of the biggest disasters of all time. Ernie Lyons wrote a column about that storm. He was in California at this time. It says, "Florida's destroyed" was a newsboy's cry in California in 1928. On the morning of September 18, 1928, I was walking down Main Street in Los Angeles when I heard a newsboy shouting, "Florida destroyed, Florida destroyed." This being of some consequence to me, I squandered a nickel for the extra and read Ed Benninger's Associated Press account of the great hurricane which breached the mud walls of Lake Okeechobee and drowned 2,400 persons in the Everglades on the night of September 6th and the terrible early morning of 17. And of course, we all know that's been upgraded to at least 3,500. There's never, ever an account, a correct account, let's put it that way. The damage here did not begin to approach the disaster in the Everglades, but things were badly torn up. Ed was the first newspaper man to get the news out and on the wires. To do so, he had to drive around mazes of fallen trees and electrical poles to Melbourne before he could find a telephone line that was connected to the outside world. That hurricane was the 3rd greatest natural disaster in the history of the United States, being overshadowed only by the Johnstown flood and the San Francisco earthquake. Now you realize this was written in 1963. No one will ever know how many figures it took, 2,400 being a conservative figure. The Glades was strong not only by the white farming and business population, but also by hundreds of imported Bahamian laborers there to harvest the early crops. When winds with winds above 160 miles an hour hit in the reverse cycle of the storm that literally lifted Lake Okeechobee out of its bed and put 10 to 12 feet of water over the Glades towns, sweeping many victims back into the sawgrass waters. For more than a week after the blow, bodies were collected in a pile, doused with gasoline and cremated. That terrible storm of 25 years ago resulted in the building of the Herbert Hoover Dike around the southern semicircle of the lake by the U.S. Corps of Engineers. It was really one of the worst things you can possibly imagine, and it's still, I believe it was in the spring, they had a memorial over at Fort Bianca for the people that were lost in that hurricane. I have several articles here that I want. And in the museum, and finding things in there as we went through stuff, we found a lot of things. Now this article has no name on it. I do not know who wrote it. It's typed, but it is very interesting, so I'm going to read it to you. I've tried to save as many things as possible. These are some of the pictures still from the 1928 hurricane. It was estimated that 40% of the city's residential and business buildings had severe damage, and 90% would need repair. Oh, I jumped to the 49, sorry. This is the 49, though. Debbie, put it on the 49, please. I want to talk about this just a minute before I start reading that. I found this, a handwritten note from Grady Norton. Now, last time somebody knew who he was. He worked at the Weather Bureau. Did anybody now remember who Grady Norton was? If you can read what that says, that number up at the top is our number from the museum, but it says, Stuart Airport barometer broke at 210 miles per hour. Winds exceeded 230 miles per hour. Miami Weather Bureau reported that this hurricane, what it says, I have the actual, and it got cut off there. Oh. Miami Weather Bureau reported that the hurricane went to sea over an unpopulated area between West Palm Beach and Fort Pierce. Now I will read to you what it has to say. I can't believe that, but I could believe it because we always heard it blew the wind clock off at 160 miles an hour. Anybody that lived here, that's what we heard. Go ahead, Cindy.
After you showed me that, I went and Googled him, and he was head of the Miami, the Hurricane Bureau in Miami.
And someone here did.
He was Grady Norton. Yeah, you can
And
Google
so
him.
this, you know, we'll never know how authentic it is, but that's way over what we've ever been told. And anybody that lived through that hurricane, Gloria, where is she? Gloria was talking about that, how it sounded like a train, the wind, and when it was over, the trees had no leaves. We have not experienced anything like that yet. I know Gloria's here, I saw her.
Yeah, she's here.
Okay, I'm gonna let all of you talk after it's over, but I wanted to read what some people had to say. In August 26, 1949, hurricane. It was estimated that 40% of the city's residential and business buildings had severe damage and 90 would need repair of some sort. Besides the Dewey Hayes and the Webb Ordway buildings, the Arthur B. Home building also had severe damage. It lost many windows on the first and second floors, and the stores and offices in that building suffered accordingly. Judge Harry Dyer's office and his law library were completely soaked. The Citizens Bank building and had heavy water damage when the building's roof was punctured and a window blew out. The east half of the Holleran building roof was blown away. The roof of the Rowell building was stripped and caused water damage for their merchandise. The Victory Hotel building had broken windows and water damage. The Stuart Hotel had front porch damage and a ripped roof and eaves, and the Kruger building had many windows out. At the Friends apartment, windows were blown in and portions of the roof blown off. Lang's Body Shop in North Stuart was destroyed. George Keith's home suffered severe roof damage. The roof of the Gulf bulk plant was torn off. Wiley's garage lost its roof. The Lighthouse Pier was destroyed and the building damaged. The Stuart Negro section was heavily damaged. Hardly any buildings escaped the fury. The Macedonia Baptist Church and Little Dixie Baseball Park were destroyed. The Pelican Hotel only had minor damage, and it was closed for the summer. It opened Saturday to accommodate incoming repair crews. It was reported a full house on Monday. After the crews left, it was closed again to make repairs before reopening in December. The Palm City Bridge remained stable, but the railings were ripped away from both sides. The bridge tender's house and the railing on the draw remained intact. This is why I think my mother wrote this, because half of it's on Palm City. The Palm City Bridge remained, the Palm City store building was left leaning and had to be torn down. Ed Mapp reported the ground in his grove was covered with citrus and about a third of the trees were uprooted. The Whitaker Boathouse in Port Sewell was a total loss of building and contents. The old house of refuge remained as it had through all the ocean fury for a half a century. The Philip Fagan house withstood the storm. It restored the next morning that poultry looked about as they wondered what had happened. The snack shop at Jensen Beach also came through okay. It was a different story south of the house of refuge. The storm winds off the ocean made a pile of rubble of 5 reinforced concrete beach cottages. Unlike previous hurricanes, the buildings were not inundated nor buried in wave-washed sand, but actually wind-whipped into piles of wreckage. Fruit stands and small buildings along US 1 from Jensen Cutoff to Hope Sound were tossed around. The rear of the Sonoma gas station was demolished. The Big Barrel, a lunch and curio shop, had severe damage when the roof and ceiling blew in. Most serious damage in the Hope Sound proper was at the Olympic Ice Company, where the rear of the plant housing its machinery was blown away. Fallen trees, poles, and other debris clogged the streets throughout the areas. During the storm, you could hear objects flying through the air and felt hitting your building. And once again, I have no idea who wrote this. The other side. This is for our place. It's okay. It got turned down anyway. She starts off with, it can happen here, and it did happen here. They didn't have names for hurricanes then, nor were they listed as category numbers. But after it had come and gone, we all knew it would be classified as a bad storm. Old timers at the time described it as the worst hurricane known to have hit this area. The winds exceeded 160 miles an hour, and some have said it reached 200. See, this is where we get into the different recordings. The velocity was recorded at 162 miles an hour at the Jupiter Lighthouse, and the barometric readings varied. The lowest reading at Stuart Fire Station was 2852 at 9:25 on Friday, and at Port Miaca was 2836. 8 inches of rain fell during the storm. The storm had a large eye, and its northern side was the strongest. Stuart experienced a lull as the eye passed on its southwest side, but it was failed by the powerful northern side. Estimated damages were $4 million in 1949. Now that was Loretta Barfoot's. Does anybody here remember somebody named Arthur Brannan? Do you? I don't know who he is.
Mr. Brannan.
This is by Arthur Brannan. The date was August 25th, 1949.
It's in Western Illinois.
Firestone tires.
Okay.
In Western Illinois.
I found this in the museum, and just in a pile of papers, and it has his name on the bottom, and it is a very good piece of writing. So Sunshine, bright blue skies, clouds sparsely scattered in the sea of blue, and the most refreshing breeze were offered to those who shared called early for an awakening. The breeze had been prevalent for 2 or 3 days prior to H-Day, Hurricane Day. It can be looked upon now as a superficial decoy, a failure to determine the reactions of mankind concerning his feeling of immunity from, I'm going to skip that paragraph because it gets kind of psycho. The true warning had been in the air for 3 days. Men's warning in the form of advisories were being received hourly. People began to take notice, and there was a scurry, a hustle, a milling of poor souls to provide and secure ourselves against the elements. The early morning hours lost their bright hue, and the wind became stronger. There was a tenseness in the air which a few hours before had not been. Men's false sense of security against the elements had been shattered. The wind became fierce, and it was a sting of a lash whipping from all directions. The wind, the wind, the wind. All in its path bowed to the superiority of the force. The desert, no, it gets a little crazy there. It came out of the southeast in a northwesterly direction, leading what seemed to be a wild stampede of 1,000 horses. It was an unrelentless ride from dusk into darkness. On the mainland, from the horizon, became fierce and eerie. Destruction was the lead horse. It gave a masterful demonstration in the handling of this wanton force. It rode into our little town from the southeast and then circled and came in from the south and the north. Then left a calling card with everyone, rich and poor alike. Broken windows, unroofed homes, collapsed buildings, uprooted trees, communication line torn and twisted fields, inundated travel halted, worldly possessions torn asunder. We did not awaken the next day to reality. We had not slept, we had lived, and that was a blessing. Never had a desire to see or feel the results of such a ride. That means hurricane.
And more pictures.
She can change the pictures. Go ahead, Debbie, put the pictures back up.
Let's do it.
Let them sit for a few minutes. That's Dewey Hayes' garage. And then change them as we read the next. The last one is my mom's. I love this story because I actually lived it. That is still Dewey Hayes' garage. It was another view. She wrote about what happened to us. I was 4 years old, but it was one event of my life that I never forgot. We had a garage. We had a big 2-story house right as you cross into Palm City. And it was very sturdy, very well built. And Daddy put shutters on, thinking that we would be safe. But as the storm progressed, the garage blew down, and the winds and the debris from the garage knocked all the shutters off. It turned into a mess. I'll read it in Mom's words. She makes more sense than I do. We had our storm shutters on and everything fastened down as best we could by early afternoon. We did not have TV or a very good radio, so we still did not know how bad the storms would be, nor exactly where it was coming ashore. I had given my family an early supper, hoping to have everything taken care of before the lights went out. My husband Fred was the superintendent of the water company for the city of Stuart and left the house about 5 p.m. to go to the water plant, hoping to return soon. The big diesel engine had to be started to pump water for the town if we lost power. We had been through numerous hurricanes and knew what to expect. It was so dark and stormy, I got our 4 children ready for bed as soon as possible. Our bedrooms were upstairs. A few of our lights went out, and the telephone was dead, and the wind continued to increase. I keep losing my place. I realized Fred was not going to be able to get back home and then I heard something hit the house, breaking the shutters off the living room windows and shattering the glass underneath. Wind and rain began flowing across the room, and later I found out it was the garage roof hitting the house. Sooty water was coming down the chimney, running out onto the floor, and I slipped as I hurried around trying to move furniture so it couldn't get wet. I was very frightened for the children's safety and decided to bring them down to the kitchen. We had a closet under the stairs with no window, what we called the pantry. I threw blankets and pillows in the floor and carried the sleeping children down. We spent the rest of the night in that closet. The wind was blowing so hard, it sounded like a train. The French doors that opened out onto the porch were shaking and rattling, and I could hear things hitting the house and glass breaking. I thought if the house would blow over, we would all be killed. My husband and two men who were our neighbors, E.V. Wortham and Tony Priory, who had also been to Stuart and were trying to get across the Palm City Bridge about 5:30 a.m. They said the wind was still blowing at a gale, but they had to try to reach their families. They first attempted to drive down Palm City Road, but could not get past the downed Australian pines. Then they came around past the cemetery on Indian Town Road, left the truck at the east end of the bridge, and crawled across the bridge in the wind and rain. The bridge railings were nearly all down, nail and splintered woods were everywhere, and it was pitch dark. They made it to their homes and found all of us alive, but badly frightened. We could not believe that no one had been killed. When it got daylight, we could go outside, and it was like a bad dream. All the trees and bushes were bare or blown away. Everything was beat down, water stood all around, and the sky was a strange yellowish color. The property damage was severe, but no lives were lost. Our friends Fred and Sudie Jones, who lived 2 blocks away on the corner of Cornell and 2nd, and a new home, were in their back bedroom with their 3 children when they began to notice the lamp light that the roof was pulling the blocks and the wall loose near the ceiling. It was storming, so they took the children, got in the carport in the car, and stayed there all night, and the roof blew off. It was found several blocks away. They were, not blocks, lots. They were able to save it and put it back on, and believe it or not, that house, my daughter lives right beside it, it's still there to this day. And in the morning, they found the roof was completely gone from the house, all except the carport. Their home was like a dollhouse with no top. Everything they had was ruined, but their lives were spared. They later located most of the roof, dragged it back, and salvaged parts to put it back on. I can't read that line right there. It must have been several weeks that we were without electricity in Palm City, as all lines had to be rebuilt. As far as I know, the only families in Palm City that had electricity after the storm were the Higby and Wortham's family, who had a generator that furnished lights. Others were able to connect picture pumps to their wells and pump water that way. We carried most of our water in buckets into the house. People who had kerosene or gas stove were able to cook. Those with electric appliances used camp stoves or substitutes way of cooking or went out to the neighbors. The gasoline stations in Stuart could not pump gas unless they had some way to do so by hand. It was several days before the storekeepers could get their stores cleaned up and ready to do business. The roads were so full of downed poles and trees that trucks could not get into town to bring anything. Everyone pitched in to clear the roads, help their friends and neighbors repair roofs, and board up broken windows. It was some time before you could buy glass and plywood and other building materials. We know how helpless you are when the fury of the hurricane arrives, and advise anyone who doesn't know not to be foolish. Get ready and get your family in a safe place. Don't take any chances. Many times we put on the shutters, taken all the plants and the outdoor furniture, stock up on food and water, fill the cooler with lights, batteries for flashlights, and kerosene for lamps, and found it was not necessary. But would it be a shame to be unprepared for the next one that could be a killer? We do have several days warning when a hurricane is approaching. Hurricanes do not come suddenly like a cyclone or a tornado. We do have time to prepare and protect our homes and family. Our motto is be prepared. And she did. She lived, after Dad died, she bought a 2-story house, and you drove underneath it and then went to our top, and she made sure she had shutters made for it. Well, her primary shutter guy is sitting in the front row over here, and every time a hurricane got within, probably 3,000 miles of Florida, he went up on the ladder, put up all the hurricane shutters, went back and took them down, and here comes the next one. Up they go, and down they come, and I think he went up and down it so many times, put those shutters up. But she, after that, was terrified of hurricanes. And none of us really know, because we haven't seen one yet. Many of us were here for the 49, but a lot of people have no idea, and now people are just going to drive off and say, oh, that was nothing. Be prepared. That's my mom's motto, and she knows. Okay, listen. We went for many years without hurricanes. We had a little one called David, and we had several tropical storms and brush fires. But in 2004, we had Frances, and she came to visit in September 4th, 2004. She blew down fences and it had been almost 50 years since we had a hurricane, and what we had not taken care of was taken care of for us. And that, that was bad enough, but then here comes Jean 3 weeks later, and to make it even worse, we didn't have power for 2 weeks. The pole in front of our house went down, and an Alabama power and light truck pulled up out there and got us. We were all, we were so happy. And 5 days later, or 6 days later, it went down again. It doesn't pay me too overjoyed about getting. Never have I seen anything like that, and I'm not an expert, but when that one turned around and started back at us, none of us could believe it. It was unbelievable. Then in October of 2005, we had Wilma. Well, the day that Wilma was going to strike, Sydney and my son were over putting up mom's shutters, and we got a phone call that our son-in-law was in the hospital in Chance in critical condition, and we left. And we left our house uncovered. He had helped our son and our daughter, and we didn't have time to do ours, so we left it. Well, we had windows that nearly blew out, so we decided after the hurricane that we were going to get impact glass if we didn't do anything else, and we did. And believe me, this hurricane was not anywhere near as bad as the others as far as trying to get ready. I wish it had been invented a long time ago. Then we thought, well, we've had Frances and Jean and Wilma. We won't get another one for 50 years. Last year, Matthew decided to come and visit, and it was a bad one. We were lucky that it went off the coast and turned and went away from us and did not hit us. We had to be thankful for that. So this year, we have Irma coming at us, another killer hurricane. And we have to be thankful that Irma decided to visit the West Coast, and not for them. My granddaughter worked over there during the whole hurricane, and she works for a TV station. She worked 4 days straight. Never got to leave. They let her go in on her cot, lay down, come back out, and they really got hit very badly in Key West and the West Coast. So we hope now that we are done for a while, and I would like to let some of the people that lived it talk.
Totally said there's nothing out there working on it.
Really? Well, we're not going to invite it to join
About 10
us.
days away yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, I haven't even
Not
looked.
10 yet.
Would some of you that would like to tell us about what happened to you during the 49 hurricane, we still have another 25 minutes. I know I was talking to Gloria Gloria, do you want to tell about how you all survived the 49 hurricane?
Get him on back in order.
It has certainly stayed in my memory. I was 9 years old, and we had just moved into a new house. It was a concrete block, and it had asbestos shingles on the roof. They were white. I picked up shingles for 6 months in my yard. It tore just about every shingle off the roof, but we didn't have any other damage. However, the noise, I'll never forget. My father's brother, Gus Cambry, lived down the street. And his son, Gary, who some of you might remember them, I don't know, was in Good Samaritan Hospital with appendicitis. And this happened just before the storm hit. They had to rush him to West Palm because there were no surgeons in Stuart in 1949. Anyway, all night we're trying to get through on the phone to see how he was doing. And the noise got worse and worse. And honestly, that is the part that I truly remember was the noise. I mean, you all have been through hurricanes here, but the noise of that one was just, there's no way to describe how horrible it was. You think it's worse than what it really is. I mean, what's going on outside. That is what I remember. And then we had a lot of water. We had two feet of water. We had a low place in the back. I lived in Casateras, in back of where McDonald's is. And there was a very low field. And thank goodness there was water there because we hauled buckets to flush the Johns. And of course everybody filled their bathtubs so you'd have water to wash your hands and face and flush Johns. But the noise, that's what I remember, truly.
Thank you, Gloria. All right, I know there's more people that lived through that than Sydney. You want to tell about taking your dad's truck over to the beach?
Yeah, my dad, we went across the Chestnut Beach Causeway. At the time, it was just a wooden bridge all the way across there. He had an army carry-on, and there was supposed to be somebody out there. There's 2 houses out there at the beach. You know, people out there, see if anybody's out there. Water splashing over the bridge, hitting the truck. I'm safe, I'm riding with my dad. Now I realize how dangerous it was. So we live right between Dewey Hayes' garage and Red Morley's Ford garage. And I remember there were a lot of people putting their cars in Dewey Hayes' garage and collapsed there. And Wade Morley right around the corner from us, it ripped the roof right off the head. Trees all over the East Coast Boulevard, running up the coconut trees, laying all over the place. And my dad was over at Martin County School there, and the big old thick doors there, that's trying to blow in. And him and some other guys had some big old planks in there, they brace it up to keep from blowing in the school there. I just barely remember that from Brooks now, just barely.
He was very alive. Yay, Boo, I know you all were here. You all want to know. You all were here. Do you have a story?
Yeah, he does.
Billy, huh?
Mrs. Spicer had a big ficus tree, and my mother claimed that saved our house because the wind was coming from that direction, and it saved our house.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, but he never showed up.
I stayed with my other grandmother, Miss Lowry, down there on the corner of US 1 and 4th Street. And my uncle has actually took pictures during the hurricane. I believe him somewhere. I'm going to see if I can find him.
Yeah, you told me that, but we don't have anything to
But
play
nothing
on.
really happened to that, either one of those houses.
But what you need to do with those is take them and have them made so we can play them. Nobody has anything left that you could play them on. We'll ask Richard about that. Pictures from 1949. You know, what in the world would you find to play them on? But have them changed into, he can't get. But is there, I know there was some more of you here. Anybody else have a story they want to tell? Okay, well, I'm gonna apologize because this was just thrown together at the last minute. And we didn't have time, I didn't have time to make it better because hurricanes are very important to all of us. It's part of your life when it happens. Joanne, you were here.
Yes, we were.
Where were you?
We lived in Palm City, right now where the Presbyterian Church is out there on 714.
Right.
My grandparents lived up on the street, and we lived in a tiny little house in the back. And in that hurricane, we were young too, but an Australian pine hit our little house, and I remember Daddy tied us all together with a rope. And we had a cat, and he put the cat in a croaker sack, and we had to leave the house in the storm and go up the yard to my grandmother's house in the front. And our little house had to be repaired and stuff like that. But we remember the bridge and the little country store and stuff like that. But we were in Palm City in the early years.
I've been told I wasn't old enough for school, and I'm sure you were in elementary school or getting ready to start. Didn't the school buses have to go around, all the way around the Arundel Shop Road to get to school every day?
They did.
And the kids had to leave at least an hour early to get to school. Did you ride that bus?
I did.
Yeah, I didn't, but I remember being told that. People don't have any idea. I know that, you know, the things from the hurricanes were very, very bad, but being without power for months, not days, being without gasoline and food, it was a big storm, and hopefully we don't get one of those again. Yes, sir.
Just a quickie.
Sure.
Pete Meyer, I wasn't here for the 49 hurricane, but I started over at Outdoor Marine in 1970 at the Quonset Hut building. The Quonset Hut building was built in 28, and the floor of that building was about 6 feet above mean high water. And I always remember when I started, there was a line on the wall that the water level was 2 feet over the floor of that building, which meant it was up about at least 8 feet in the river out here, 8 feet above the mean high water.
I know Corky was here. I know he was here. Have you got a minute to tell us? Okay. Never hand Corky a microphone.
Seacoast Bank, in those days we were First National. And after the storm was over, the sun came up, we all drove down to look at the bank to see if it was okay. It looked beautiful. We opened the great big doors, slid back, and there were 6 inches of water in the bank. The hurricane had sucked the tar paper right off the roof, and everything in the bank was soaked. Thank heavens that Carabel Law, however, had made everybody cover the ad machines and the typewriters with they all came with covers, plastic covers, and so that saved them. So my dad said, all right, you get the hunting buggy. And we didn't have a Jeep, so we took the hunting buggy. He said, you go to Hope Sound and get the roofer there, and I can't say his name, I've been trying to think of it. He was a hell of a nice guy and an excellent roofer. And you tell him that we really need him up here in a hurry to get this bank going. And he talked very slow like this to Ricky. He said, son, you tell your dad that I'll be there first thing in the morning and we'll get that bank dried out. And driving down US 1 to get to Oak Sound in the woods buggy, every telephone pole was down across the road. And they had like 5 yard arms of wires. There were hundreds of wires. And I was driving across all of those copper wires and going around the poles, wondering if I was going to get electrocuted. But I didn't. So then when I got home, my brother and I and my dad spent the next 2 days on step ladders taking the acoustical tile off the ceiling that had been glued on, and the glue was softening in the wet, and they were falling. And Dad said, we can't have this happen to one of our customers. So we were peeling all that off. So that was fun.
Thank you, Corky. Hale roofing?
Frank Hay.
Frank Hale.
Yeah.
Frank Hale.
Yeah, he talked very slow.
Again, thank all of you, and if nobody else was here, we'll close it out unless they're in. Tony, you were here. You've been here since day one. This is Toby, our president. Let's let him tell his story.
We had the boatyard out in Fort Salerno. We had charter boats that went out deep sea sail fishing. And we also had the storage for the boats that people went away in the summer. We stored them up in dry storage. And on one side of the creek there where we had it, the water came up so high that it floated the boats that we had stored away. And they floated not away from anything, but they just floated the blocks out from it. There was chopped up with wooden blocks, and the wooden blocks floated because some of the boats lay different ways, but it didn't hurt them. It just lay in different directions. And then all the boats was smaller boats we put in the boathouse, which was underwater. And then the bigger boats we had to take out because they were getting too high to get up in the top of the cabin. So we had to take the big boats out, and we didn't have any problem with any of the boats in the water. Only thing we had trouble with was the ones up on the land that had been in dry storage until the flood came during the hurricane, and they floated and just floated up to mess up the boat and angles and stuff. Didn't really hurt any of them. So we were really lucky. We had coconut trees all the way around the house where we lived. And when we got through, we looked, and every coconut tree was down, but it all went right around the house. None of them hit the house. They were all within 4 feet of the house. And not one of them hit the roof of the house. They all just went around in circles all the way around the house. So that was lucky. So we didn't have any trouble with the roof in the house. So we were quite lucky.
Thank you, Toby. Okay, I know I'm missing somebody. Is there anybody else that would like to tell their story?
I don't want to tell a story, but I think it's interesting that today we have the fortunate to have all the preparedness that we can have today. We didn't have a lot of that before. We didn't have the noise, the newspapers and the TV stations before. But today, we're so blessed to be here where we can shutter up and we can prepare. And we've been really fortunate. I had a woman working for me for a while that was in Andrews in Miami. And she said that you cannot imagine. And when this last one came here, when they were saying 185-mile-an-hour winds, we were panicked. And I know she said down there when that hurricane hit, that after it was over, they had held a mattress to a door to keep their door in that wall from going in. And she said when it was over there, it was nothing but darkness. There were no lights, there was nothing. And people didn't know what streets were what or where they were. And she said they would come around at night and hand out flashlights to people because they didn't know what street was where. And I know in our town after that, they came around and marked our intersections on our streets in big white letters and things so that if that did happen out here, they would know. But we are really fortunate where we live, and we know how to prepare today. And I think a lot of people that come here and have never been in a hurricane, they get in the car and leave, but us that live here, we're fortunate enough that we can prepare. And I think that's a really good thing today in the storms that we're having. Oh, you can. You can walk away.
I'm Jay Smith, Joanne's husband. In 1949, I was a young kid who had a Cushman motor scooter I used to get around on. My folks were friends with the Boswells. They had a sign company here, Ed Boswell and Charlie Boswell. Well, we lived in a little Camp Murphy house at the foot of where the 10-cent bridge is now. And Ed Boswell had just built a hurricane-proof house about a quarter of a mile south of us on the river. Everybody called my dad Smitty. He says, Smitty, you got to get your family out of that house and bring them down to my house. He says, I've got this brand new hurricane-proof house. You all come down here. So we did. We packed up and went down to Boxwell's house on the river. Everybody mentions the wind. The wind was terrible. All night long that wind blew and water blew under everything in that hurricane-proof house. My job was to take the towels out from under the doors and bring them out of the garage. We had the crawl space open into the attic to keep a check on the roof, and it was just like that roof was breathing all night long. Well, the next morning, we survived that. The house stayed intact. The next morning, we went down to check on our little wood frame house from Camp Murphy. Couldn't drive down, there were trees all over the St. Lucie Boulevard. We got down to the house, we walked down, opened the front door. The house was fine, nothing wrong inside. The crown of the coconut palm next to the house on the lee side had broken off and blown out of the tree, hit the ground, and it bounced up and broke the glass out of the window on the lee side of the house. We didn't even get rain in the house. So we survived that fine with the house, but I have another little interesting story talking about the winds. At that time I was, I don't think I was a senior, no, I was a junior in high school, I guess, and I worked weekends at the airport in Woodland Field. I got so much flying time and so much pay. Well, after the hurricane, I took my scooter, came down the runways from St. Lucie Boulevard over to the administration building at the airport, and it was gone, demolished. Standing in the middle of where the administration building was a partition wall. On one side of the wall was a bookcase full of letterheads, envelopes, that sort of thing. Everything in that bookcase was intact. None of the papers blew out of there. It's just amazing.
I say she was talking about having things that we didn't used to have, like Mom said, we didn't have TV, we didn't have radio, we didn't have anything. We did have a radio, but we didn't have TV. Well, we have TV during, if it sprinkles, direct TV goes out. Do you know that we never lost TV one time during the hurricane? Now you can figure that out. How you can lose power when there's nothing but a little rain trickle out there and a hurricane hits and it never went out. We did not lose our power this time. I think it works in cycles because we were without, like I said, 2 weeks before and then almost another week again. And this time we never lost power. So, you know, the gods that be, you just don't know. But the direct TV, we all said it'll be gone within the first few minutes. Never went out. That is weird. Okay, we are prepared and we need to stay prepared. And I want to tell you that museum, unbelievable. You can sit up there when the wind's blowing and the building just kind of sways. It would take a mighty storm to blow it down. I didn't say that because we don't want it to get out too loud. But I would not be afraid to stay in that old building ever. And that's the way old Florida buildings are. Absolutely the best there is. And we need to appreciate how smart our ancestors were.
Tell them to admire the new shutters.
Oh yes, and by the way, stop and look at the new shutters that we hopefully we'll never need, but we have them. So they put Bahama shutters on there, the city did, on the top and around the sides, and then the fronts all locked down, including the doors, and it does really look beautiful. So I want to thank all of you and for your patience and getting through the storm, and your newsletter should be there tomorrow, but don't come back. Thank you very much, all of you.